Chris Squire bought his first bass from the North London music store where he worked in the mid-60s. It was a Rickenbacker, only the fourth one ever to be imported to England, and he still plays that bass to this day. But that Rickenbacker didn't make his debut in a Yes show. No, Chris Squire first played it as a member of Sin. Now, this particular Sin was relatively short-lived, and they broke up in '68, after which Chris met vocalist John Anderson, and that fateful meeting gave birth to one of the most successful progressive rock bands ever, Yes. A success achieved thanks to the band's combination of virtuoso musicianship, 3- and 4-part harmonies, and their sweet-like songwriting style. This is your Uncle Joe Benson, and we'll hear the story of Yes, lineup changes and all, from the only member who's been there through it all, Chris Squire, off the record. When's the first time that you ran into or heard John Anderson?
Well, I was 20 years old in 1968, which was a fun age to be in 1968. There was lots of late-night psychedelia, and we ran into each other at a club called Le Chasse Club, which was actually just a little bar, not really attached, but next to the Marquee Club in Wardour Street in London. And for anyone who doesn't know, in those days, the Marquee Club was like the mecca of where every hopeful English musician, you'd achieve something if you made it to the Marquee Club. And of course, American artists who came over to England, that's where they played. So everything that was, pretty much worth seeing was being performed there. And so John knew the guy who owned this little bar next door, and a lot of the musicians who played at the Marquee Club used to go there and drink, and that's where I ran into John. And I was introduced to him as, this guy Jack Barry, actually, who owned the place, just said, "Hi, John, this is Chris. He plays bass. I used to be in this band called Sin that had played at the Marquee Club." He knew me from there, and he said to me, "John's a singer. Why don't you two boys chat?" And I think he bought us both a drink, and we sat at the bar, and that's how we struck up a conversation.
Where did you first run into Steve Howe on guitar? Was he an opening act or something?
Well, no, once again, those days it was all very close-knit kind of muso community around London, and it was either the Marquee Club or the late night club, of course, was the Speakeasy Club, where to have bands on, not every night, but a lot of nights, and people would play there till 2 or 3 in the morning. So that was like the late night jam kind of club, and I saw Steve Howe there. No, I didn't see him there first. Actually, I saw him at the UFO Psychedelic Club first, playing with his band Tomorrow. This was even before Yes. So I'd seen him around, and then once, and as I said, I saw him at the Speakeasy again after we'd started working with Yes. And we got to do the second album, which was Time and a Word. And John and I very much were into, this adding orchestral arrangements to the songs, which was, I guess, somewhat of a little bit of a fad at that time, but we were very into the idea. And Peter Banks wasn't so into the idea. He thought we should stay as a pretty purist sort of rock band without adding strings, and so our musical approach obviously differed. Strange thing is, I don't think Steve Howe was particularly fond of the idea of having string players either, but we'd already made the album by then, and that was finished, and he joined us, and of course the next album was the Yes album, which was the first album that Steve played on.
Yes released their third record, the Yes album, in 1971. They shared the production credits with engineer Eddie Offord, who'd been working with Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Yes did their first real tour of the States in the summer of '71, opening shows for Jethro Tull. But by September of '71, they were back in England working up songs for another studio album and dealing with personnel changes. This is your Uncle Joe Benson, and Chris Squire has the intimate details next, off the record.
Hi, this is Chris Squire from Yes, and you're listening to Off the Record with Joe Benson.
At this point, the Yes album, I don't know when it went gold, but by the time you went back to England and it was time to record new material and whatnot, had you realized a commercial breakthrough at that point yet?
The Yes album in America? No, the Yes album in America took its time to go gold. In fact, the Fragile, which came out after it, went gold, and we actually went to number 2 in the chart, actually. So that went gold pretty quickly, and then the Yes album took a couple more years to actually catch up to that. So,
but when you got back to England, it was time to record what became Fragile.
Yeah.
You had enough success. You didn't have to worry that you only had 7 minutes of studio time to finish the entire album. You had enough slack, didn't you, from the record company?
No, things were pretty much, on a roll, I guess, then. I mean, we done, this tour was deemed successful with Toll. And then I guess we came back and, at that point also we had a first parting of the ways with Tony Kaye. Steve and him weren't really seeing eye to eye on certain things, more to do with personality than musical, really, to Tony's defense. So then we recruited Rick Wakeman, of course, and so that was the whole energy that took us into the Fragile. And once that Rick was sort of in the band, we wanted to put out something straight away to show our current identity. So that wasn't that long before Fragile was released after the Yes album.
The other song I'm going to ask about here actually is quite short, and it was written by John. A Long Distance Runaround.
Yeah.
Was that something that was kind of tossed in to the mix, or was that like early on said this song has to be on?
There was Long Distance Runaround, which was, we all liked that as a song, and we worked up the arrangement for it, which was interesting. And then there was Heart of the Sunrise, which of course became a very important song for us. And the other one, of course, was South Side of the Sky. And apart from that, everything else was just the small solo interludes, as it were.
Did you think, you're recording this music, this is a good tune, did you think this is something that's going to be around 30 years from now, people will be playing this on a regular basis?
Let me put this in perspective. I mean, when I was 16, as I said again, in 1964, and the Beatles have only broken in 63, and they broke up in 69. So that was a 6-year career, and yet the Beatles were awe-inspiring and huge in the world perspective. So when Yes got together in 68, I thought, well, if we're together in 74, we'll have equaled what the Beatles have done. So that was the perspective. Well, I could never conceive that Yes would still be around like 33 years almost later.
The nickname The Fish, because you took baths, or because...
Bill Bruford and I on our early tours used to share a room, and he was always bitching because I used to spend too long in the shower. And I am a Pisces too, though. So.
Okay.
But he kind of gave me that name. In fact, it wasn't Luffy. He used to call me Fish all the time.
The other track, and you've already mentioned it was one of the first ones that was put together, was Heart of the Sunrise. Probably the longest song you'd attempted at that point in time. Yeah. And you weren't known for doing a lot of short ones anyway, so this was saying a lot. But I saw that live, and it changed my life for a while. I can't tell you exactly how, but I saw that live and it changed. My God, look at this. Look what these guys are doing up there.
Yeah.
That had to be a powerful,
Yeah, that was... How the Sunrise was a very, much a blueprint for Yes, I think, and what followed. That we stretched to that point where we realized we could do songs that had, different tempos, different movements, of like mini classical pieces, really. And as you say, by the time we brought that to the stage, we also had the advantage of having Michael Tate as our first road manager, who'd been with us, who now is like the whole kingpin of US stage design and lighting for everyone these days. So, it's like that. He started off as our first roadie. So by that time that we would on the Fragile tour, he was getting really good with the lighting, and so we had that live combination of visual and audio.
Heart of the Sunrise was the longest tune Yes had worked up to that date, and it was the definite inspiration behind their next album, Close to the Edge. The band returned to the studio to begin work on Close to the Edge in spring of '72, immediately after the Fragile tour. Once again, Eddie Offord was brought in as producer, and though Yes were at the top of their game musically, things were not well within the band itself. Drummer Bill Buford apparently tired of the internal workings of the band, and he grew bored with the Close to the Edge sessions, so Bill decided to leave Yes immediately. I'm Joe Benson, and when Off the Record returns, Yes undergoes yet another lineup change and takes a hiatus. Keep it here.
Hi, this is Chris Squire, and you're listening to Yes, Off the Record with your Uncle Joe Benson.
Well, Bill recorded Close to the Edge. Bill Bruford recorded Close to the Edge, and then
left.
Yeah.
I know. Brilliant strategy, that. I used to say to him, are you sure? Things are going well, aren't they? I mean, I don't think I'd want to leave right now, but he had a certain compartment in his brain that, you know, certainly he liked to be a little less secure, even though he was an economics major and so that was actually had all that financial side of his life all very organized. To combat that, he had this jazz ethic on the other side, which made him take chances, and you know, and he just loved the idea of going to play with Bob Fripp and do stuff that was a little more out there, you know, not as commercial.
And what I see it, again, in retrospect, the time is like, oh my God, what's going on, blah, blah, when we heard about this. But this was the third time that Yes had gone through this. You set up the first one. First time Bill Bruford joined the band, you played a gig that night.
Yeah.
Rick Wakeman finally decides to join the band, you start recording the next day.
Yeah.
And time to go out on tour, better find another drummer. Alan White, what are you doing in the next 48 hours?
Exactly. I know.
Was Alan somebody you'd known him for a while as well?
Well, Alan was a good friend of Eddie Offord's, and Eddie was working with him on other projects. You know, he was engineering. So, yeah, he was someone that I knew, we all knew from being around. And it was really Eddie Offord's suggestion that we try him, you know.
Did he look very nervous having to learn your songs with the complex things?
No, Alan never looks nervous. He jokes about it now, but the first show, I think it was in Dallas, that we did at the beginning of that tour, he did everything totally perfect. And the second night, everything completely fell apart.
One of the tracks on that is another one that still gets some airplay, and it was certainly one of the prettiest things that came out of the whole first part of the 70s. The song was called And You and I. Was that one, did that come early in the session, or because Close to the Edge was such a large work, was that what you worked up for a while and then?
No, you know what? I think we really worked on Close to the Edge first as a project we wanted to do this long piece, and one of the great things about Close to the Edge actually was that we did actually go to a rehearsal room and play the whole thing before we ever went to the studio. So we could play Close to the Edge from the beginning to the end.
Oh, it wasn't like that for anything on?
No, nothing after that was like that. You know, but we were still pretty much in the old school of, you know, although we'd gotten used to using studio technology, we still would like, okay, well, we've got to learn this tune, so let's learn it from the beginning to the end. And that's kind of what we did. And it was good because you knew when you started playing at the beginning what was coming at the end. And so you played the music with a different sensitivity. Now, later on, when we got to when we went in, let me just fill in a bit more. When we went into the studio at Close to the Edge, we recorded it in sections. We didn't play the whole thing. I mean, we recorded the first instrumental section and the first song, and we knit it together as we went along. And we went, well, this is fantastic. This that we can do this. You know, the wonderful world of splicing tape. You know, and so everything, of course, was starting to get very neat and very well played. And then you tack it onto the end, but we still knew where the song was going at the end.
You officially put Yes on hiatus 79?
Yeah, we had a couple more tours after
81, March of 81.
After Patrick had been there for the relay phase of the band, Rick rejoined, and we did some really big tours towards the end of the 70s, and that's when we first started doing our tours in the round, and that was a very exciting thing, especially sound-wise, because it meant that you know, we were more in the middle of everything, and the sound didn't have to be thrown as far, and it was people really loved the sound from those shows. So, you know, and then by the time we, you know, got to 79, you know, I guess we were then definitely ready to have a break. It didn't quite work out like that, though, because we were halfway through putting material together for what turned out to be the drama album. And at that point, John and Rick both decided to go and pursue some solo ventures, which left Steve, myself, and Alan White, kind of wondering what we should do with this album that we were halfway through. So we just fortunately bumped into Trevor Horn and Jeff Downes, who'd had a huge commercial success, Video Killed the Radio Star, and they walked into our management's office and they wanted to use our management services, and so we got to know them that way. And then before you knew it, they were kind of giving us ideas, and we were working together on the drama album.
John Anderson and drummer Alan White shared the writing credits for Wondrous Stories. This is your Uncle Joe Benson, and by spring of 1980, Yes had officially disbanded. Bassist Chris Squire spent some time assembling tracks for the live Yes show's release, and for the 1982 Greatest Hits album, Classic Yes. He also recorded a one-off Christmas single with drummer Alan White called Run with a Fox, and it was that single that eventually led to a Yes reunion. How, you ask? Well, Chris Squire tells us next, off the record. This is Joe Benson, back with Yes, Off the Record. Now, Chris Squire and Alan White met multi-instrumentalist Trevor Rabin while they were working on their British Christmas single, Run with a Fox. That partnership eventually led to Yes's hugely successful comeback album, 1983's 90125.
Alan and I decided, we'd like to start working again, because, we had a couple of years really of just laying back, and we did some work with Jimmy Page and stuff like that. Trevor, so we decided to put this together again, and I guess his name came up again, and by then he'd moved. He had been living in London for quite a long time, and so we got him back from here, and he came over to England and played with Alan and myself, and we really, actually, I don't know, it was one of the worst jams I think any three people have ever had. But at the end of it, we went, wow, that sounds, we didn't play very well, but you're a nice guy. So we knew we could play. It was just, it was funny. It was just like, we got on very well, so we decided to go ahead with, working with Trev.
You operated for a while under the name Cinema, or was that just a brief?
That was it. And with under the guise of Trevor Horn at this point now, producing the album, and of course Atlantic Records were very, very keen for us to change the name back to Yes, because that was their franchise, obviously, and they thought that we'd do a lot better. And so I said, well, we can't really do that, and because that's not. It's only Alan and myself, and Trevor's a new guy, and Tony Kaye had come back, so there was some justification to it. But of course, then the next thing was, you could do it maybe if you got John back to sing some of the stuff, And I said, okay, I'll give it. So I went to see John and played him and stuff, and he loved it, especially the vocals on Leave It and all that work. And so he came back in the last 3 weeks of the album, sang it. And that was 90125.
What's the biggest rush for you now? Getting out on stage, performing the music again? Is that magic?
Well, we've always loved performing, and that's kind of something that we've come to an unspoken agreement about, I guess, that we really do love it, that when we do a great show together, and you can sense that. And from a personal point of view, I love playing live, and it can only go so far, and then my attention then will get drawn back to wanting to do something new again. Even though nowadays some experts will say, well, why would you waste your time doing that anymore? There's not much point in you doing anything new. You might as well just go and do shows and cash in like that. But I always get excited by the idea of just maybe being able to pull off another surprise. Having been there with 90125, just when everyone thought prog rock was dead, to be able to sneak around the back and come up with some way. But you haven't heard this, you know. So I'm always hoping, whenever we go into our next studio project, that we might be able to pull that off again.
You toured this last time around. You've been touring for Billy Sherwood on guitars and vocals as well.
Yeah.
Will he be joining you in the studio again?
We're going to start it off just myself and John and Alan and Steve, and probably without any keyboards either. So that's the way we're going to look at the next album initially. But who knows where it will develop.
When you're on stage performing, like you just came off the road a little while ago, do you find yourself, and again, when you started playing in a band, there was no idea the group was going to go on for more than 3 or 4 years.
Right.
Do you find yourself looking around the stage going, these are my buddies. This is cool. This is very comfortable.
Yeah.
And, hey, life is good.
Yeah. It's great. I just need to make that another little extra notch in the Yes gun belt there. If we can pull that off, that's really my next thing.
The current Yes lineup of bassist Chris Squire, vocalist John Anderson, drummer Alan White, and guitarist Steve Howe plan to start work on a new studio album next month, which they hope to release sometime next year. But you won't have to wait that long for something new from Yes. The band will release the concert DVD, Keys to Ascension, this January. It features over 2.5 hours of live concert footage. YesWorld.com has more information on that. Yes, Off the Record is a presentation of Westwood One and was written and produced by Stacey Para, quoting liberally from the Uncle Joe's Record Guide to Progressive Rock Bands. Production and engineering by Ron Harris, assisted by Brett Abbott and Dave Amaya. Special thanks to Westwood One's Dub Room crew, and a big thanks also to Jeff Varner at Left Bank Management and to my special guest, Chris Squire. Always a pleasure. I'm Joe Benson. You can email me at unclejoe@unclejoe.com.